And welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sport. It is Wednesday, and we are a day away from the build-up to the fifth round of the United Rugby Championship. And it's going to be a very interesting round and some very big news with regards to some big players who are set to make their URC debuts for their franchises this weekend, as well as a little bit of an update on a couple of players who have signed new deals overseas. They're very significant because they're South African players. And yeah, we'll also look at a little bit of the issue with the Springboks, for example. A lot of talk at the moment about the fact that the Springboks are not going to be able to pick Japan and English-based players or French-based players potentially as well in that match against England at the end of the year. So, which is going to make it very interesting from a selection point of view. In fact, I think tomorrow we're going to actually do a live potential SAA squad, and then on Friday I think we're going to do a live potential sort of alternative Bok 15 or 23 rather for that England game, should we have to play it without our England-based, France-based and Japan-based players. But yeah, before we get going, please do smash like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well. We are chasing down 20,000 subscribers, so make sure you go and subscribe and show your support there. We need less than 400 people, I think less than 350 people to subscribe, and all of a sudden we'll be sitting at that big 20k mark, which will be very cool. But yeah, we're going to start off with ETZEBETH, and there's some pretty big news because the rumors have it, as Adele said, that ETZEBETH is set to make his Sharks debut this weekend. In fact, it's been quite a lot about it in the media in the last couple of weeks, the fact that the Sharks have got so many Springboks, they've got all these international stars, and yet they never play for the Sharks. In terms of, so, a bit of a war, what's the point? And I can understand that to a certain degree. I mean, like, I said, you play against Leinster, and you only play against Leinster once. And, to then, so considering the fact that you've only got that one opportunity to play them, to have to play them without ETZEBETH, Khaleesi, Mapimpi, the Kanyan's obviously injured, but he wouldn't have played anyway. All these sort of your big name players, it gets quite frustrating because you sort of sit there saying, well, what was the point? Why do we have all these world-class players if we can't use them when we really need them? And it's a problem that we're going to have to, and the problem, I'll tell you that the problem comes with the fact that the candidates aren't aligned at the end of the day. That's the biggest issue, the fact that we don't have Six Nations. We've got the Rugby Championship. And as a result of that, we play rugby throughout the entire year, and there's no opportunity for these players to rest, and it is becoming a bit of a major problem because, for example, Jasper Wiese is back and playing in the Premiership, and he's played far more rugby than he probably should have, and the problem is obviously you've then got no power to tell the likes of your Leicester Tigers, no, please don't play and we need him to rest and stuff like that. So you do have more of that sort of power when it comes to your local franchises, because there's that agreement where they can sit there saying, right, cool, we need you to rest your Springboks this many games, stuff like that. But the reality is, how it plays out is that we've now had 4 weekends of URC action, and we haven't seen Siya Kolisi, we haven't seen Eben Etzebeth, we haven't seen Makaswama Pimpi, we haven't seen all of these sort of big stars. And I mean, when you think that there are there's a total of, I think it's 14 rounds, 15, 16. There are 18 rounds in the URC. So we're almost a third of the way through, and we're still missing all our major sort of names. But even to be fair, if you look at the other sides, you like your Leinster stuff, even their internationals are only sort of coming back into it now. So the big thing, for example, is that, I think that the Sharks players still do get a bit of time off at the end of the year after the end of year tour. So I don't think they play URC in December. So the problem is you then only got these players, you basically only had them consistently January through to June, which is still 6 months, to be fair. So there's still quite a lot of time. There's a lot of rugby there being played. So if you're Champions Cup, your Challenge Cup, that's all fine because you'll have your big boy names. But it is quite frustrating because we Leinster versus Sharks, you want to be watching the two best sides. I mean, they basically can be almost fully international sides playing against each other if the timing's right and the right players are available. But we're not getting that because players are having to be rested and stuff like that. So that's kind of sort of the conundrum that these teams sort of find themselves in. But regardless of that, ETZEBETH is rumored to be making his Sharks debut this weekend. One imagines that then means that Siya Kolisi could be back this weekend. They're playing against Glasgow Warriors. It is down in Durban. And you do wonder if maybe these players would have played a bit sooner if the games had been down in Durban. because obviously, you know, they just come back from Argentina. It was a 3-week tour, stuff like that. They had 1 week in Durban, and then they would have had to have jet out to Europe to join their franchises. Whereas, for example, you know, we have seen, for example, David Willis play, but he did get that week off from the box and stuff. So the Sharks are playing at home this weekend. The Lions are playing at home this weekend. The Bulls are away, and the Stormers are away. But so given the fact that the Sharks are back this weekend, I do think we'll see a few more players. I don't know about Maxwell Mapimpi, for example, but I think we'll see Seklese. I think we'll see Evan ETZEBETH. I reckon we'll see Oxen Chair as well. Could very well see Jaden Hendricks back into the mix. So we will probably see far more Springboks back and much closer to a full-strength Shark side this weekend as they take on the Glasgow Warriors. That's on Saturday at 4 o'clock. Lions playing against Ulster at 2 o'clock. You've got Munster versus Bulls at 8:30. And then we've got Stormers versus Ospreys at 8:30 on Friday, which we will definitely be live for. I'm hoping to be live for the Munster versus Bulls game as well. And the good news is that there are a lot of different ways you can watch all this rugby on free-to-air broadcasts and stuff like that. So, you know, I think I'm hoping that the URC will really start to build a bit of momentum in the last couple of weeks, because for the Springboks, for the South African sides, they've got this weekend, they've got next weekend, and I don't think they're playing that final weekend, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so you know, I lie. They do play on that Sunday, 30th of October. You've got Bulls taking on the Sharks, and the Lions taking on Stormers on the 29th of October. So they do play in that final sort of round. So we've got 3 more weeks of URC and then we're into the end of year tour. Now, from a Bok management perspective, for example, you obviously don't want these guys coming, you know, completely cold to the Bok setup. So you probably will want them to play a bit of rugby over the next sort of month, building into the end of year tour. But at the same time, you know, worrying about fatigue or something like that, you want to make sure that someone like Evan ETZEBETH is fresh. He needs to be putting in 10 out of 10 performances in the end of year tour. You know, we need him to really pitch up against Ireland and against France and against England, because he will be available for England, for example. So these players need to be really ready for the end of year tour. So it's kind of that consistent balance between making sure they get enough rest so their bodies are fresh, and making sure that they still match sharp. And you can only be match sharp by playing matches. So it's continuous to sort of grapple between how to get that balance right. The other big news is that Evan ETZEBETH might not be the only one making their Sharks debut this weekend. Vincent Chuka is also, there's a rumor that he is potentially fit and could be back this weekend. Has missed the start of the season through injury, so has yet to play for the Sharks. In the meantime, his brother has gained quite a lot of plaudits for the Lions, but yeah, I mean, Vincent Chuka, the best Lions player by a country mile, one of the best URC players in last season. I think he collected about 5 or 6 man of the match awards. Arguably, for me, the biggest, him and ETZEBETH, the 2 biggest signings for the Sharks over the summer. So to have them back, for example, in the same pack, it's actually going to be quite frightening, to be honest. When you think of the physicality that both of those guys bring, the fact that they could both be on the same side this weekend, you know, I think it'll be impressive to see. Yeah, Bongi Vanambi, for example, should be back as well. So there should be a lot of Shark stars who I think will be coming back in the next couple of weeks. And whether they'll play all 3 games, they might play 2 games, not play that last game, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. It also depends, for example, you know, when the nice thing is there's no time difference, for example. So from a travel perspective, the Bok team could be flying out on the Sunday before they play Ireland on the Saturday. You don't have to worry about you know, any time zone adjustments and stuff like that. But yeah, so how are you doing? He's saying after what happened with the Bulls, the Sharks shouldn't take this match lightly. Saying he likes Taki Abrahams and 11 more in Maxwell on attack, but in defense for Pimpy. Yeah, I think Bongi should hopefully be back this weekend. Braystar saying Sharks spend so much on Springboks, I don't think they're getting full value out of them. We'll be off buying stars that aren't doing national duty. Well, I think a lot of it sort of depends on sort of how the season starts to align and stuff like that, and whether this will be the norm or whether this is just sort of exactly how we're sort of still seeing how it all kind of works out. You know, I personally think that we can condense the Rugby Championship a little bit. You know, I think it was 6 games played over about 9 or 10 weeks. You know, so I think if you can reduce that by even a week, by 2 weeks, you know, I think we need to be looking at a situation where hopefully the Rugby Championship is wrapping up before the URC starts. And then it's a bit like the European sides where maybe the Springbok players are missing the first 2 matches, maybe even the first 3 matches, but not missing the first 4 or 5. But the big thing, I suppose, is the fact that they will be available for the Challenge Cup, they will be available for the Champions Cup, and they will be available for the business end of the season. So it's kind of about having those players who can get you through the first sort of 4 matches, really, and then hopefully your big sort of stars then are then back in the setup and they can sort of, you know, step in and do the business. But it is a weird, interesting approach because, for example, the Lions didn't lose a single player, and they've really capitalized on the fact that they managed to have the same team, that they managed to have a full preseason. They're a side which looks very aligned, and they're currently sitting sixth in the log. Higher than the Sharks, actually, with 3 extra points. They're sitting with 3 wins out of 4. Sharks do have a game in hand, as do the Stormers, who are sitting in third place, just 4 points off the lead with a game in hand as well. So they've had a really good start to the season. But yeah, there's definitely that sort of part that sort of plays into it. But again, I think a lot of it's kind of just because we are here now. I think, the reality is, if they start playing this weekend, even if they miss maybe 2 matches in December, if they're missing 6 matches in total of the URC, that's a third of the URC, which sounds like a lot. But there's also the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup, which is an extra sort of 4 or 5 matches. So you're then saying, right, we've got Evan ETZEBETH. If we play in 23 to 24 matches in a season, he will be available for 19 of them. It's not bad. It's not bad. The issue is just when it comes and the fact that, the start of the season is when we're like ready for the season, we're ready to get going, and they're not there. And it's like, but I mean, we want to get into this competition, they're not quite there. When they do start coming back, it's sort of, you get those sort of mid-season blues where you kind of not really that invested in tournaments, kind of sort of more just ticking over, rather than sort of the initial excitement of the start and stuff like that. But again, it's about getting it right, and it's about getting those sort of non-Springbok players to be able to step up. And I think that obviously, I don't think we've seen as much rotation within the Springboks that we might have seen. So we don't know if that's going to start changing in the future and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. But the big news for the Sharks is that if ETZEBETH, for example, is back this weekend, you can expect to see a lot of other Springboks in the lineup there as well. I don't know how many other Boks you'll see around the various places. For example, I know Dane Billings to return home, so I'd be surprised if I don't think Stephen Kitsoff and Frans Mahova are flying out to join the Stormers on tour, but I reckon you'll see them next weekend. I think this next weekend that the Stormers are back at home, and I think that all of a sudden you'll see Frans Mahova, you'll see Stephen Kitsoff back into those sort of sides there. Next weekend the Stormers are actually, they've just started their tour actually, so they're away next weekend as well. So I don't know. Interesting to see what exactly happens with that as well. But yeah, in terms of speaking of the Sharks, for example, the Sale Sharks have announced that the 2 twins, Jean-Luc Dupré and Dan Dupré, have both signed new 3-year contracts, keeping them at Sale Sharks up until the summer of 2026. Very, very good players at the end of the day. And they've been very good for Sale. And a lot of people are sort of sitting there moaning the fact that they haven't gotten more Springbok opportunity and stuff like that. But taking that away, for the Sale Sharks to be able to go and bring them down 3-year contracts, I think that's a very big move for them. Both for Sale as well as the twins themselves. It does mean that they're not going to be coming back to South Africa, for example. I think a lot of people are now sort of, their ears are perking up and thinking, who else can we bring back to South Africa, with the fact that, so many players are coming back, but they are definitely not coming back, in the fact that they've signed a 3-year contract. So that's some pretty big moves for Sale there as well. And then some big, well, it's not really news, we kind of knew about it, but it's kind of been discussed as well, as the fact that at the moment it still looks very likely that the Boks will be playing against England outside the Test match window, without their England-based stars, potentially French-based stars, as well as Japanese-based players. And as a result, you're going to have to pick a South African-based 23, which, at least, for example, this year, will include the likes of a Evan ETZEBETH, and some of those sort of players who come back. They could pick a Marcel Coetzee, depending on when his Japanese contract does sort of start and stuff like that. Johan Huijsen back in the mix. But yeah, I think that would be a very interesting side, given the fact that you're not going to have your Franco Mosterts, Peter Steph du Toits, Andre Pollards, your Malcolm Marxes, your Lourt Diagas, your Kwaka Smiths, Billy LaRue, all these players who are playing overseas, Ches and Colby. So many players who are sort of overseas based who won't have them for that England game. And I think it's very frustrating because now England players will be available because they've got the Rugby Football Union, much like SC Rugby, got an agreement with the South African sides. They have that. They have that agreement, which we obviously don't. So they can release their English players, but they won't release the South African players. And I think it's just frustrating because I think England versus South Africa at Twickenham is such a legendary fixture. It's such a cool match, and it's going to be a bit of a farce, really, because it's probably going to be a worse side than the SAA side. It does, however, produce a lot of opportunity for the guys in the SAA to impress, try and get themselves into that squad for that last game against England. Because it's like, for example, we talked about yesterday that Gianni Lombard apparently is potentially in the mix to go into the SAA tour. If he has those 2 good games, for example, or even Monileva, one of them could find themselves getting a test cap against England in that final test with couple players leaving, will not be available for that match. So, silver lining is, I think, is an opportunity for new players and stuff. But at the end of the day, it will be very frustrating given the fact that what should be such an amazing test match, and should be such a significant test match, is definitely being watered down by the fact that it's outside the test window. But yeah, just to say, I never thought I'd see the day that Evan played in the Sharks jersey. Bradley Bay says, thoughts on who was slotted in the centre of the Sharks after Brian Janssen van Rensburg ban? We'll probably see Werner Koch in the outside centre. That's why I think he's the best, to be honest. It's frustrating for Rand to get back. He's such a good fun player to watch. But yeah, I do think we'll see Werner Koch in the centres there. Yeah, I think that'll be a quick fix. I do think that Werner Koch's best in the centres, to be honest. I always think that he might not have necessarily the pace for 14, but he's such a hard worker, hard grafting, energetic player. I've always said outside the centre suits him. Vic saying, even without the stars, I do think the Sharks have a sort of pack against Leinster. Pimpy at centre and keep the Rocket on the wing. I definitely want to see Pimpy at centre. As Vic saying, Werner Koch played 13. Just it will be nice to see Robert Dupree back in the Sharks jersey. Yeah, I mean, they need a fly half, so maybe they need to look at that sort of option. I'd be surprised. But I don't see it happening. But Brextar saying the match I'm looking forward to, Stormers versus Sharks, hoping all Springboks available. It'll be all Stormers versus the new Stormers. Not far off. It really is, actually. When you think about all the ex-Stormers playing at the Sharks. When do we get play, like, I mean, I suppose, you kind of have that whenever the Lions play anybody in South Africa. It's always the new Lions versus the old Lions, given the fact that we basically just such a producing talent for every single bloody union in the country. So, yeah, unfortunately, team announcement or anything like that today, so we don't have too much to talk about at the moment. It's a bit of a dead rugby news day. I'm hoping for some more stuff. A couple other sort of headlines, for example. Paul Delport has stepped down from the Women's Sevens setup, where he did very well there. And I think it's a big loss. I do see him as a potential future Blitzbox coach. So I think that, I think we will see him back in the Sevens setup one day. But he has left the women's part where he did a lot of good jobs. For example, I think Ulster named the touring squad, and Dwayne Vermeulen is in the touring squad, so he is set to potentially play against the Lions this weekend, which would be quite cool. He needs to get some game time, so yeah, the chief executive of the World Cup has been sacked, which is always fun. Yeah, Claude Archie was removed from his position on Tuesday. Yeah, for alarming managerial practices apparently is the issue. So France 2023 CEO has been sacked. Things you love to see. I mean, the year after the World Cup and the CEO is being sacked. I mean, it's not really ideal, is it? But yeah, as I said, not the biggest sort of news day. So hopefully we'll have more talked about tomorrow when we've got some team announcements, for example. We have some more injury updates and stuff. There are a couple of press conferences happening today, so we'll have a bit more information about what's plotting ahead of the weekend. Then we'll obviously have all our previews, how to watch videos and stuff like that. Remember to please sign up to BetCoza, where you can get yourself some free bets. We've got a lot of people winning free bets, which is very cool. But yeah, please do smash a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel as well. And I will chat to you guys all this time